A very warm welcome once again. The National Assembly says there are no plans to stifle press freedom following proposed amendments to two media bills which are currently being considered at the House of Representatives and will soon be sent to the Senate for concurrence. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Press Organization, comprising the Newspapers Proprietors Association of Nigeria, the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and the Nigerian Union of Journalists, is kicking against the draconian provisions in quote in the two bills. The group says the media bills are intended to criminalize journalism practice in the country, though the sponsors of the bill say it is aimed at moderating the recklessness, in quote, of the media. The group said the media, which is the oxygen of democracy, will be strangulated if the bills are passed in their present forms. They are calling on the National Assembly to remove the obnoxious provisions in the two bills that will strangulate rather than regulate the media. The new media is also not left out of the onslaught by the federal government against the media. Let's take a listen.
One of the most liberalized media industry in Nigeria, private radio stations, private television stations, news online. But at the same time, there is always been the tension between right to freedom of expression and, of course, the untoward activity that extreme use, particularly false information, can render on society. So regulating in order to take away unsavory attitude would not mean the media is being gagged. Media cannot be gagged anywhere in the world.
Henceforth, all OTT, that's over the top, and other social media platforms, must register first as Nigerian companies and be licensed by the Broadcasting Commission before they can carry on any business as social media platform.
Well, to help us analyze this ongoing development, we are joined by Yobosa Wugeren, who's the General Secretary of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and Emmanuel Ogbeche, Chairman, Nigeria Union of Journalists, FCT chapter. Gentlemen, you're welcome. Well, the media is at the forefront. Now, we talk about others, but this time around, we have to talk about ourselves. I just want you to take us through this opposition by the Nigerian Press Organization against these two bills, because the federal lawmakers say that they are trying to amend this because the media has been reckless, including the social media, which is not left out. How reckless have we really been, if it's true?
Yeah, I want to believe that many of the opposition or many of the criticism by the politicians, by the political elite against the media is not actually done in such a way that to correct the wrongs which they identify in the media. Those criticisms are carried out to bully the media, and as far as we are concerned. Well, let me make this point clear from the perspective of the Nigeria press organizations, and that is the UMPAN, the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and the NUJ. We are not opposed to regulating the media. What we want is a body that will be comprise of all stakeholders within the media. I'm talking of the NUJ, the Guild of Editors. We want a board that will be managed by this professional group, and rather than having a board that is controlled by the Ministry of Information to determine what is published and what is not published. Now, let me give you an example. In the present amendment B, especially the Nigerian Press Council, yes, you will discover that even that council that was created by the military in 1988, first it was known as Media Council, Nigerian Media Council Board. Later in 1992, it was amended to read Nigerian Press Council. If you check the content of that council, you will discover that they were even more liberal than what the present democratic government is saying now. So let me just give you two sessions in that amendment bill that they are talking about. They are saying, for example, that the press council will have a representative from the NUJ, from Nigerian Guild of Editors, from UPAN, from the BON, from the Ministry of Information, and from members of the public. Two members of the public, one must be a lawyer and who must be a woman, for example. And they said the board, for example, will be a mere advisory board, that the power to control the council will be given to the executive secretary, who will be appointed by the president on the recommendation of the Ministry of Information.
Yeah.
You know, and there is also another section, for example, where they try to criminalize journalism practice, and they said the code of conduct will be approved by the Minister of Information, and it can only be used after the approval of the Minister of Information,
who may not be a journalist. Well, let's actually listen to the views of Emmanuel Ogbeche here. In all of this, we are seeing what looks like an onslaught against the media generally, despite the fact that media organizations have said, look, let's come and sit down and look at the issues. We are willing to listen to you. But it looks like these bills were actually smuggled, like some people have said, to the House of Representatives, because media organizations were not given, professional organizations were not given an invite on time. It started first with the Twitter ban, and all of a sudden we saw the federal government trying to bring that regulation to the social media, and all of a sudden we saw these bills coming to the House of Representatives. In all of this, what do you think is the target of this Buhari-led administration?
Well, it isn't just about this government. There has always been a fascination by governments all over the world to stifle press freedom, to gag the media. And particularly with this administration, if you take into cognizance the fact that they have failed on 2 occasions, you know, to pass a social media regulatory bill, and it didn't happen. So the only means to achieving their long-term objective is to smuggle it in as it's been done, and not making the proposed bill available to stakeholders.
Yeah, we were surprised the public hearing wasn't made known to people.
Yes, I remember that the NBC, you know, code that was amended and passed is still controversial and contentious, and that is exactly the objective in this regard.
And that was so controversial that the board, the chairman of the board of NBC rejected.
Not just the chairman, all members of the board.
The entire board.
Yeah. The entire board of the NBC rejected its own code, but the government went ahead. The fascination to criminalize media, one begins to wonder to what end, because the media isn't responsible for the humongous corruption we find. It isn't responsible for the poor leadership, you know, that has unfortunately been the lot of this country. So we will critically interrogate why government is bent on, you know, we must control the media.
Yes.
Is it to advance the cause of democracy, the rule of law, or what exactly?
Yes, a lot of people have said that President Buhari's regime, and then even this government, has always been fascinated with trying to actually look at what the media does instead of focusing on running his government. Now, in your statement, you are the General Secretary of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. You said that the media is not the enemy of the state, that we are not out to compete with the powers of the federal government. Can you shed more light on what you meant by that?
Yeah, the point I'm making is that from the action of the government in the last 6 years, they're trying to portray the media as if we are opposition party to the federal government. I would say we are not. We are only doing our job within the context of the constitutional provisions and the social responsibility.
But the government has also said that when you have a media house, for example, referring to the president as General Muhammadu Buhari, even when he says an elected president, that looks like the media is overstretching its powers.
A general is always a general. Let us not debate that. If you decided to use that title as general, well, that is
they refer to him as a military regime.
Yeah, that is just his own. A general is always a general. Why do they say refer to Babangida today as General Ibrahim Babangida, or Obasanjo as General Olusegun Obasanjo and that? But if you choose not to use that title, fine. But there's something criminal about using the word General Muhammadu Buhari. It's a general for life. You know, let us not go into that. But like I said, there's a constitutional provisions that give us the mandate to do our job, and the section 22 of the 1999 Constitution said the media shall at all times hold public officers accountable to the people. You know, and we also have a social responsibility, you know, to discharge our duty to the members of the public. Yeah, for example, the Arise is owned by Unduka or Baigbena, but the real trustee of the Arise television is the members of the public.
And that's why the licenses are given on behalf of the public.
Exactly. So we own the public that responsibility to discharge our job in the interest of the general public, not in the federal government. And within the context of that constitutional provision, we also have a responsibility to hold the government accountable to people. And whether they like it or not, whether they are offended or not, we must continue to do our job. Like Ima said, we're not responsible for the current crisis we have in this country. The media have always been very patriotic. You remember during the military era, at a point, all the labor union, the political parties were chased out of the country. The media remained, and they were the real. They were the institution that waged the struggle, and at the end of the day, the military were out of power.
Yes.
So those who are complaining today are actually the beneficiary of the democratic struggle.
Yeah, but we just have to go on a break now. When we come back, we'll continue that conversation. You're still watching This Week on Arise News. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation on what's going on within the media and then the plans by the government to actually regulate some media bills. Stay with us. Welcome back to This Week. I'm Sumner Sambo, and we're still continuing our conversation here. I still have with me in the studio Yobosa Wugeren, who's the General Secretary of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and Emmanuel Ogbeche, who's the Chairman, Nigeria Union of Journalists, FCT chapter. Now, gentlemen, the federal government actually brought in this issue, which has been disturbing it very well, into these amendments, the issue of fake news. And then they are actually saying that if a media organization actually carries fake news, that anyone who carries it actually, and then it is established, and then commits an offense, is liable on conviction to a fine of 5 million naira or a term of 2-year imprisonment. Or both, and then a compensation of 2 million naira payable to the person or groups, and all of that.
It's 20 million.
And then, yeah, I'm coming to that 20 million own. There's another one which UNG had also made mention. It says that any medium that was used to carry such news is liable on conviction to a fine of 10 million naira or closure of such media house for a period of 1 year or both, and compensation of 20 million naira to the person, group, corporate body, government, or any of its agencies whom the news was carried against. Man, it looks like once it's established that there's a fake news, whether it was an error or not, about 30 million naira would have to go to the person who's allegedly injured. Your views on that?
It's regrettable and unfortunate that government will think in this direction. The courts are there. People that feel maligned usually seek redress, in court. So one doesn't understand why the introduction of this. And remember that the Cyber Crime Act of 2015 is in existence, and it's been used, to test
it's been tested over and over.
So
we've had judgments.
Because you failed in regulating the social media, you're now smuggling in the aspect of fake news, as if all the woes of this country is hinged on fake news.
But what's the area of even a corrigendum in that? Shouldn't there be room? Because he didn't create a room for a corrigendum when there's an error and the media organization says that we have committed an error.
Now, the question also is there to ask. We found a situation where government officials are responsible for fake news, what we call fake news, where they have tweeted, where they have posted on social media that this and that has happened, only for them to retract. And if a media organization, perchance, were to rely on such a post by a government official and reports it, and it turns out to be fake, who pays the penalty?
Very interesting.
You understand? So it doesn't make sense. And when you look at all countries that are fragile, their democracy is fragile, the human capital index is low, there are countries that are more interested in media regulation than governance. And Nigeria cannot be found in that. Already we are ranked 120. We fell 5 places in 2020 on the Press Freedom Index. Imagine where we will be when this bill, if it happens to pass through. But we know that we will be insistent that this bill cannot see the light of the day.
Yes, I've heard other legislators who are angry, saying that they're anxiously waiting for this to arrive at the chambers so that they will actually voice out their concerns through their votes. Now, let's talk about that issue of fake news. The media actually has fallen to some of these things, especially sometimes when we obsessively follow social media, when there's a breaking news, and times we realize that some people who are called citizen journalists misled us. In that aspect, where's the role of retraction in all of this?
Now, exactly what I was saying. If you look at the old, the NPC, the Nigeria Press Council, that was created in 1992 by the military, there's a room for retractions. They said when they discovered that a newspaper, for example, carry a fake, a story that is not true, that the Press Council will order or direct the newspaper to publish a corrigendum. It is after some days, and the newspaper refused to do that, that they will find the newspaper 2,000 naira. that was the oldest something. But now they're trying to criminalize it under a democratic dispensations, and that for me is very suspicious. We don't even know what they want to achieve with that. All over the world, there is that right of reply. If I carry stories and you want to dispute that stories, you have a right of reply. But in this proposed amendment B, there's no room for that.
And it gives room to suspicion, actually, on the part of government. When you see that the NBC, the National Broadcasting Commission, is being amended at the same time with the National Press Council, and then there's also a law being proposed to actually force the over-the-top platforms, the OTT platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and all of that to be regulated by NBC. Don't you think that there's a grand agenda that is being pushed, especially by someone like Lai Mohammed as Minister of Information, who many journalists have said actually peddled some fake news and false information while he was the spokesman of the opposition during his time as ACN?
I absolutely agree with you, because when we keep on saying that a threat to the media is a threat to democracies. When you take into consideration the responsibility of the media in deepening democratic space. And like we said, the media is the oxygen of democracies, and when you begin to attack that democratic space, then you are threatening the democracies, the growing democracies, So, and that's why we are saying you can't gang the press, you can't criminalize.
And all of us actually find it very difficult, because this Lai Mohammed, when they were in the opposition, himself and some of the ASEAN leaders then referred to a sitting president, former President Goodluck Jonathan, as a kindergarten president.
Not just that, you remember prior to 2023 general elections, Lai Mohammed stated that if President Goodluck Jonathan is declared as winner, that they are going to form a parallel government under this present dispensation.
And the media gave him a voice.
Under this present dispensation, Mohammed would have been charged for treason.
And
that was a statement he made in 2015.
So it's just so surprising that this same person is the one
the same people benefited from a very robust democratic space. Now you are in power now. You want to string that democratic space. You don't want to listen to the voices of other people again apart from you. But they should know that in the next 1.5 years, they will be out of power. I think Lai Mohammed, for example, should be interested in the legacy that he's going to leave behind. Because whether we like it or not, during the military era, we were confronted with the same things. And we fought them. At the end of the day, the media wrote the obituary of that government. So I don't think this one will be the same.
Well, let's hear you out
different from
on all of this, because broadcast houses have been, we've been slammed with several fines. Arise here, we're slammed with 3 million naira fines. And what is supposed to have actually been taken to court? Let the court be the one that will be deciding these fines and not the NBC.
The media is being asphyxiated. There is no oxygen, as it were, because most media broadcast stations in particular will have to think twice. Who is going to be your guest? When there are phoning from listeners and viewers, how do I censor the calls that are coming in? It isn't just about when they were in opposition. As a government, we have had situations where they told us that the United States had given them a list of former officials of the past administration that stole certain amount. It turned out to be fake.
Many people were taken to court. The court discharged all of them.
All of them. Criticism is the oxygen of democracy.
Absolutely.
Any government that is immune to criticism, any government that doesn't want accountability, will always look for means and ways to regulate the media in such a manner that they continue to operate in opacity.
Well, we have
And
less
that is
than
exactly what is happening.
a few minutes to go. I just want to talk about us journalists, the responsibility we actually hold the country to in the practice of our profession. A lot of people have said some journalists have been doing some unethical things and we need to actually regulate. This is the time for self-censorship, as some have said. What would be that self-censorship that you want us to embark on very quickly?
Well, I think the issue of training and retraining is very important. And when you look at it, it isn't every fact that we know as media practitioners that we report.
Oh, okay.
Because we are sensitive to what certain news can cause in this country.
Oh, okay, just hold on. I've been told we have to go on a break. When we come out, I'll definitely give you that last shot so that you talk about that. Well, it's time for a short break here. There's more when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back to This Week, where we hold the best of conversations and analysis. I'm Somna Sambo, and we've been discussing the amendment to the Nigeria Press Council Act and then the amendment to the National Broadcasting Commission Act, in which the media organizations in the country have actually said that it's an attack on the media. And then we've actually heard from these two gentlemen here, Iyobo Sawugeren, who is the General Secretary of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and Ima Ogbeche, who is actually the Chairman of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, FCT chapter. And then we're just concluding on that. We'll just round off this issue before we go ahead to the next issues. Let's talk about the denials that have been coming. I mean, we've seen the presidency denying that they have a hand in this bill, saying that, look, just remove Buhari from this. It doesn't have a hand. And Lai Mohammed, who is the president's employee as Minister of Information, is also saying that, look, this looks like a private member's bill from the National Assembly. No one is taking ownership. What do you have to say about that, including the role of journalists to self-censor themselves so that we don't fall into the trap being dug for us?
Well, first, it was the spokesperson to the president that denying that the president was not involved, that it was a federal government thing. And the question you want to ask yourself, what is the difference between presidencies and the federal government? And our position was that, or it's also is that if you think the president is not involved, the Minister of Information, the sole promoter of this proposed amendment B, is an employee of the president, and the president should call him to order. And I said, look, I employ you to do a job for me, and what you are doing, I didn't approve it. So please forget about it. So
it's a bad press against my government.
It's a bad press against my government. I think the president has a responsibility to call Lai Mohammed to order. But unfortunately, Lai Mohammed today, in a story that I read in a Nation newspaper today, also denied that the federal government is not involved. And that the person that is a private bill being sponsored by members of the House of Reps. As a matter of fact, yes, it's being sponsored by members of the House of Reps, one Odugbemi, But we know actually that rep, that members of the House of Reps, is just the evil spirit that is being used by Lai Mohammed to torment the press. We know very well.
You didn't talk. Sorry, just before you come, I wanted you to talk about the self-censorship aspect that the media should engage in.
I agree.
Because there's been a lot of outcry from the public.
That we have challenges within the media, and don't forget that the media is very discipline when it comes to disciplines of verifications. If you know the process, I'm sure you are a journalist, you know the process that it takes, to get newspaper published in the newspaper. But once in a while, we get misled by our sources. And once that is ascertained, we don't hesitate to apologize to members of the public. So some of these fake news you talk about are being spread by people who are not journalists, and they should not be regarded as trained journalists. And even the challenges we face in the media today were caused by the federal government as a result of the suffocating political and economic environment that were created by the federal government. And so, within the context of the challenges that we are facing, I can tell you that the media is still the best in all the democratic institutions.
So we'll continue to serve as the voice of the voiceless.
We are not saying we don't have challenges. We have challenges. I can tell you that so many reporters have been sacked, so many editors have been sacked for an offense that border on ethical conduct. And we'll continue to do that. And that is self-restraint that we are talking about. The Minister of Information cannot dictate to us how we should practice
and should not provide a code to us, because we may have an information minister that's not a journalist. Just in 60 seconds, very quickly.
The irony of this bill at present is that it is being sponsored by a member of the opposition party, the PDP. What is the PDP doing in reining in its member? You understand? That is trying to sponsor a bill that is against press freedom, that is against freedom of expression. So I think the political class needs to be very careful. and be upright in what he's doing. Because if the PDP allows this and remains in opposition, they will have no voice whatsoever.
And
to,
they may likely remain in the
speak on
opposition
issues
for
of
more
governance
than
in this country.
is necessary. Okay,
And the
very
man is from your
interesting.
state. I'm sure his constituency will be ashamed of him about what he's doing.
Well, Honorable
currently
Debumi
in the
says
House
he's
of,
actually doing what
House
is
of Reps.
necessary because the media needs to be regulated. So we'll just have to give him room, and then let's also, as journalists, allow the system to go through. The bills to go through the system. That's what some have said, and we all wait to see how that legislative process turns out. But we just have to move on to other stories now. The Department of State Services, DSS, confirmed that its operatives invited Islamic cleric Sheikh Ahmed Gumi for questioning, but has now been released. But unfortunately, the cleric also said that he wasn't invited. He denied being invited by the secret police. Gumi says he is aware that bandits worked in collaboration with some security officers to facilitate the movement of arms across the borders into the country. However, the Nigerian army has dismissed these accusations, saying that it remains a symbol of national unity that discharges its constitutional responsibilities in the most professional manner. Army spokesman General Onyema Nwachukwu says Gumi's utterances are calculated to denigrate the military and undermine the sacrifices of the troops. Well, let's just take a listen at this.
These bandits, if you don't know, they are cooperating with a lot of bad elements in our security system. This is a business. So many people are involved. You'll be so surprised. And I'm still against anybody who is committing crime against this nation, against humanity.
Cooperating with a lot of people in our security system, expatiate on that. So that means you're saying there's complicity? Our security architecture is working with the bandits? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They were caught in Zamfara. They were caught everywhere. How can these big weapons get across our borders? How can this big weapon cross our borders and get into the forest without the cooperation of some bad elements in the security system? It's not possible. If I give the same amount, can you take it into UK? You cannot take it into UK because their security is alert. Well, so you see, part of fighting this banditry is to overhaul our security system.
Well, classical Sheikh Ahmed Gumi, they're saying it as it is. And I mean, this was more of like a bombshell. But a lot of Nigerians have said that they are not surprised because, I mean, they are used to having all of this information coming out, that they are collaborators. Remember, during the Jonathan administration, there was a probe even at the Armed Forces cantonment in Jaji, where some soldiers were actually caught, removing arms and selling to Niger Delta militants then and all of that. But this statement by Ahmed Gumi has actually, brought a lot of, utterances from the Nigerian government too. And the military has said that, look, it's not engaged in this, and if it's happening, it's just a few, and they will take action. What's your view about that statement?
Yeah, even though I'm not a follower of supporters of what Gumi has been doing in the last few months, behaving as if he's a spokesperson to the bandit. But I don't think his statement that he made about a few days ago is not new. It's just reacting what many Nigerians think. Yeah, the military, the army as an institution might not be involved in such criminal activities, but there are few elements, within the security circles that are collaborating with these criminals. I told a story of my experience in Benin when I was negotiating with the kidnappers, when my junior brother's wife was kidnapped. For about 5 days, I was negotiating with the kidnappers. And when that woman was eventually released, was carrying almost about 8 months pregnancy, when it was eventually released, it gave a very vivid experience of what he went through while she was there. And where she was kept, almost about 200 meters away from where she was kept, there was a military checkpoint there. And the day she was released, it was the military officers, according to her, that escorted her to where she was dropped. So, and we have had so many stories like that from Nigerians who were kidnapped by some of these bandits, that they are working in tandem with some bad eggs within the security cycles, being the military, the police, or the DSS.
So what action should be taken by these institutions?
You also remember during when Solomon Arase was the Inspector General of Police, where some kidnappers were arrested in Benin, and they confessed that the then Deputy Director in charge of operation DSS in Benin, and the deputy commissioner of police in charge of operation at that time in Benin were part of the gang. And those guys were invited to the first headquarters here, and I don't know what happened to them, whether they were dismissed and all that. So there has always been that confirmation that there are some bad eggs within the security agencies who are working with these criminals.
Okay.
So as an institution, they might not be involved, but there are some bad eggs within them who are involved with these criminals.
So what action should be taken right now? Isn't this a call for an inquiry, a public inquiry into how the armed forces are actually doing this? Shouldn't the president be thinking of, doing something special away from the official channels of dealing with these bad eggs?
Yes, one will imagine that with such weighty allegation, what the military ought to do is to institute a probe.
Exactly.
Because we've even seen in Zamfara, traditional rulers have been suspended for allegedly, collaborating with the bandits. So rather than dismissing with the wave of the hand what Sheikh Gumi has said, the Nigerian government ought to, by this time, think of how to take a look at what has been happening. Because the issue of small inflow of small arms and light weapons into this country is alarming. And we know we have very vast borders.
Very open borders.
Yes,
that are
not all are
policed.
But then, the chances are that there are individuals within government that are colluding with these elements to undermine national security. You understand? And it is even more embarrassing that Sheikh Gumi will say, I wasn't invited, and the secret police, that the DSS, is here to at least give us vivid proof that he was invited and he appeared before them.
Okay.
It is embarrassing.
As we try to round off this conversation very quickly, a lot of Nigerians just want security to be restored. Do you think that it's time for the government to start listening to voices like this instead of just dispersing it and waving it by the hands and just saying that, look, we are doing our best and all of that? Isn't it time for us to have something like, a committee that will actually take a look at some of these allegations that come in? An inquiry, a sort of public inquiry that is well accepted, and then that has civil society organizations included in it.
You see, it's part of the reason why Nigerians don't like giving information to the security agencies. When you give them information and they are trying to be defensive in the way the Director of Information in Nigeria issued a statement where he was very defensive about the way he responded to issues. When people get to have this information that will help the system, they don't give. Because they know that they don't make use of such intelligent report. And even when you give them information, sometimes if you are not careful, they expose you. And at the end of the day, you get killed by the bandit. So I think what the government should be doing, or the security agency should be doing, especially at their senior cadres, to pay more attention to Nigerians who are making such a statement. For example, if I make a statement and you want me to come and share more light on that statement, invite me. I will come there and give you a report of what I know about the collaboration of some security agencies.
As long as you won't also be exposed.
Exactly. If I know that I will not be exposed.
Danger.
So I will give you some information that will enable you to do your work thoroughly. And at the end of the day, some of this bad air within the system can be smoked out and dealt with according to the law.
And I was wondering why the police did not issue any statement. Because we have also heard how involved some policemen are.
Yeah. So I want to believe that Gumi was invited, and we confirmed that he was actually invited. Maybe he was invited to share more light on what he said. I don't know. But to just say if he was invited in order to intimidate him not to make such statement next time, then I think it's not good for our system.
Okay, the police, we haven't heard from the police, considering what...
Not just the police, other paramilitary agencies. We have customs, we have Nigerian immigration, and I think Gumi's statement isn't just about the military.
Yeah.
It's about
and the issue is we keep hyping security is everybody's business. But when you interrogate the security architecture and the allegation that there are elements within the system that are, colluding with these individuals, they become defensive.
And they'll tell you it's a security matter.
Yeah.
Just let go at that point.
How do you earn public trust, citizens' trust, to be part and parcel of the solution to what is happening? I think we need a rethink so that we can engage constructively with citizens.
Well, we need a rethink so that we can engage constructively with citizens. Well, It's a very important issue, actually, considering that a lot of Nigerians do not have trust in institutions to be able to help them out when they're actually in need. It's time for us to go on another short break. When we return, we'll be talking on more critical issues affecting the nation. Stay with us. So this week, I'm Sumner Sambo. President of the Senate, Ahmad Lawan, has explained that it is significant for the federal government to continue to borrow responsibly to fund critical projects in Nigeria because the country is poor. The Senate president believes it is not reasonable for the federal government to tax the people more in the face of the present economic conditions, adding that the country's infrastructure must be developed. Let's listen to him.
We have several bills, very important ones at that are pending, and we are working round the clock. We are at the moment dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the PIB, the petroleum industry bill, and by the grace of God, our committees, the joint committees, will finish their work on it by the end of the week. Hopefully, the reports would be laid on Tuesday in both chambers. This is what we have planned, and this is what we are working towards.
All right. Still with me here in the studio is Iyobosa Awugeren, who is the General Secretary of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and Emmanuel Ogbeche, who is the Chairman, Nigeria Union of Journalists, FCT chapter. And gentlemen, we've had the federal government insisting that they need to keep borrowing. But this time around, we are surprised that the Senate President is the one providing more information as to why the federal government has to keep borrowing. And meanwhile, this is supposed to be the institution checkmating the executive, while he has said that they actually will keep scrutinizing every request by the executive to it for borrowing of funds. What's your view on that?
Well, against what the Senate President said, that there's no alternative to borrowing now.
Yeah, they can increase taxes and all of that.
I think it might not be actually correct because if you look at, as at the last time when I checked, cumulatively, both the federal government stand as a guarantor to the state government, we are owing our foreign debt is almost about $36 trillion. And that is huge. Taking into consideration where we are coming from. During President Mohammed, during President Olusegun Obasanjo, for example, when Okojo-Iweala was the Minister of Finance, our debt was reduced to almost about $3.something billion, and which was okay.
We paid 18, got 12,
yeah, exactly.
All of that,
but now you have a system that almost on a monthly basis, the president keeps on sending a request to the National Assembly for them to approve external borrowing,
which is not made up of only federal.
Yes, and from what the information we also got from DMO, the Debt Management Board, they also believe that Nigeria will still borrow more, because if you look at this current budget, we have almost a deficit of almost about 4 trillion naira. So which means that we don't even have other means of funding the budget, so they will still borrow more. But I am saying that there's alternative. There are so many leakages within our system, for example. So if we're able to block those leakages, we'll have enough money to fund our budget. Okay. Now look at what's happening in NNPC. Almost about 70% of our foreign earning is from NNPC. But we end up spending that money to import refined oil to this country. For me, if we're able to fix our refinery, we're able to block so many leakages we have in the system.
Government is waiting for
I'm sure we'll have enough money to fund
off the Dangote refinery, hopefully by next year. Now, let's talk about it. Can't the federal government actually widen the tax base? Instead of increasing the tax, yes, they did with 7.5% now of V8 instead of formerly 5%. But a lot of people have said that if they widen the tax base, with having more people pay tax, that it will actually help, not to increase taxes actually, but to widen it so that more people will pay taxes. It can help to increase, government revenues.
Well, it can, surely, but we must first of all ask, what have we done with what we are, collecting from people? The idea that you collect and there is no commensurate development doesn't help in the long run.
Especially in the midst of
and I do not know
corruption.
The logic that says, okay, we cannot tax the people more because eventually we're going to pay. And what is debt servicing? What is the value of the debt servicing at present? It far outstrips if you were to increase taxes. But like Yobos has said, we need to plug the leakages. we need to cut down on the cost of governance.
Yeah. Okay.
The idea that people will be riding, you find in a convoy 30 SUVs, fuel guzzling, you have retinue of special advisors, special assistants, and all of that.
Yes, we need to cut that.
Cannot continue.
Okay.
Look at the National Assembly. 36 billion for renovation,
37.
and it is 37.
Although
and
it was reduced
leaking.
into
You understand? No, but
trenches.
at the end of the day, we must be very careful with expenditure.
Okay, very interesting indeed, because we are, while other organizations are saying that we should reduce our debts, the government is saying that the debt to GDP ratio is very low, so we can borrow more. Well, we just hope that
What of
the
revenue
best
to
things will
GDP?
continue
Exactly.
to happen. Well, we'll move on to another story now. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has been sentenced to 22.5 years in prison for the murder of George Floyd, whose dying gasps under Mr. Chauvin's knee led to the biggest outcry against racial injustice in the U.S. The punishment handed out fell short of the 30 years that the prosecutors had requested. With good behavior, 45-year-old Chauvin could be paroled after 15 years. Well, let's just talk about that quickly as we try to round off this conversation.
That is a country where you have a very robust justice administrations. You'll be sure that if you commit a crime, then you'll be dealt with according to the law. Unlike in Nigeria, for example, look at Farouk Lawan that was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment about a few days ago. Took 9 years?
7 years.
Sorry, 7 years.
7.
It took 7 years for a lower court to try that case.
With a chance for an appeal. I
With
don't
chance for
know
appeal and
how
Supreme
long
Court.
that
I'm sure
appeal will
six.
last again.
So I'm sure by the time the Supreme Court is done with that, it will take almost about 20 years. So the point I'm making is that this is a lesson, a very clear message to Nigerians, that we need to have a very robust justice administrations. Because if people believe that they cannot get justice in court, they will resort to other means of getting justice.
Do you think justice has been served for George Floyd, considering that the prosecutor was actually asking for 30 years and all of that, but eventually that didn't happen?
Yes, owing to the
22.5.
political charge atmosphere, I think it's a good deal.
Yeah.
It's a first step, in ensuring that law enforcement officers in the U.S. do not get away with murder. So I think it is instructive, it is symbolic, and going forward, I think more officers and police departments across the U.S. will be more circumspect.
Yeah, and then considering that this is coming in a racially tensed country where normally police, would be free to do so many things, but considering the race of George Floyd and then the race of Derek Chauvin, a lot of tension has arisen as to what exactly this judgment will look like at the end. So we got the conviction, the trial, the conviction, and then eventually sentencing now. What do you think this actually means for the U.S. justice, criminal justice system in terms of race relations?
Before now it was very difficult to get a white police officer stand trial. So I think it's a first step in the right direction, that ultimately reforms will be carried out, that people, no matter the color of their skin, will be held accountable for crimes they commit, even as law enforcement officers.
Okay, and then let's just hear from you. What kind of lessons should our law enforcement officers in Nigeria here actually take from this? Because we see lots of people being killed by accidental bullet discharge and all of that, and then cruelty actually in handling suspects and all.
It's just to say that nobody is above the law, but because in Nigerian system, what we have is like we have a two certain law, one for the poor and one for the rich. For example, if a poor man is arrested or tried for stealing maybe a mere phone, you can be rest assured that within 4 weeks that person is sentenced to jail. But for politicians, it takes many years. I can tell you that there are some politicians who were arrested in 2023 for alleged corruptions. As I speak to you now,
2003.
Sorry, 2003.
Yeah.
As I speak to you now, they are still facing trial, almost about 30-something years.
Yeah,
after.
the EFCC chairman actually said it the other day.
So we need to learn from the system. We need to learn from the system. What I'm saying is that we need to build a very strong institutions that whether you are rich, whether you are poor, we face the same law, and we can be rest assured that the same law will be applied to both the rich and the poor.
Okay, gentlemen, I must thank you so much for joining us to take a look at these critical issues, beginning from the media bills that the National Assembly undergoing scrutiny, and then with the outcry by the media organizations in the country that is targeted at them and at reducing their powers, down to the issues of Sheikh Gumi, and then borrowing by the federal government, and then Derek Chauvin's trial. Well, we must thank you for joining us in this edition of This Week. And from me and the entire team here in Abuja, goodbye and thank you for watching. I'm Summer Sambo.